Their mouths are still open, over 300 of them, packed into 12 stone chambers on what used to be a beach. 2 seconds before all of this, they were alive, some of them still holding their children, some are still wearing their jewellery, one of them still has his sword. They've been exactly like this for nearly 2,000 years, and almost nobody talks about them because everybody's too busy talking about the other city. Guys, let's be honest, everybody knows of Pompeii. 4 million people visit it every single year. It's one of the most famous sites on the planet. But there was a second city, closer to the volcano, that was hit harder, preserved better, and almost nobody knows it exists. Herculaneum sat only 7 kilometers from Mount Vesuvius. When the eruption started, the people who lived here grabbed what they could carry and ran for the shore. Hundreds of them crowded into a row of stone chambers along the waterfront, vaulted ceilings, open to the beach. They huddled inside with their families, their valuables, and their house keys, and they waited because a rescue boat was coming. Sent by one of the most famous men in Rome, he'd already launched his warships and was sailing directly towards the eruption. His story is one of the most incredible things we have ever researched for this channel. But first, what actually killed 300 people inside those chambers? It wasn't what you think. It wasn't lava. Lava never reached Herculaneum. It wasn't ash. The ash came later. And it wasn't suffocation either. It was just the heat. About 12 hours after the eruption began, the column of ash and gas rising from Vesuvius collapsed. It sent a wave of superheated gas and rock fragments racing down the mountainside. A pyroclastic surge. When it reached Herculaneum shoreline, it was between 500 and 555 degrees Celsius. That's over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is double what your home oven can achieve, moving at 80 kilometers an hour. And those mouths that I showed you at the start, they were not screaming. That's one of the biggest myths of this entire event. They never screamed. The heat was so extreme that muscles contracted instantly, soft tissue just vaporized. Their skulls cracked open from the inside with star-shaped fractures from their own boiling blood. Published studies describe their death as happening in a fraction of a second. They didn't die slowly enough to scream. At Pompeii, the temperatures were lower, around 250 to 300 degrees. That's still fatal, but slower. Pompeii victims had time for their bodies to contort into defensive positions, their fists up, bodies curled. You could see it in their casts. At Herculaneum, the victims barely flinched. The heat erased them before their muscles could fully contract. But there was one body that was different from every other victim at this site, found inside a building on the main street, not in the chambers or not on the beach. Something had happened to his brain that has never been seen before in the history of archaeology, but we'll come back to him. These people ran to the shore carrying whatever they could grab, and the things that they brought tell you everything about what they thought was happening at the time. They didn't think that they were going to die, they thought they were being evacuated. Archaeologists have found gold jewellery on the bodies, bracelets, rings, earrings. One woman known as the Lady of the Jewels was found still wearing all of her gold. She'd put on her most valuable pieces before she left the house. And when you think you're fleeing a disaster, you take what matters. You take what you can rebuild a life with. She wasn't preparing to die. She was preparing to rebuild for what came after. Now this is the detail that got to me. Multiple victims were found with their house keys. They locked up their front doors on the way out. The volcano is erupting, ash is falling from the sky, and they locked up their house because they expected to go home. And in Chamber 11, archaeologists found a young woman who was pregnant, close to full term. An 8-month fetus recovered with her remains. She was leaning against the back wall with an adult male beside her, 3 children with them. This was a family, waiting together in the dark while the ground shook. Chamber 11 was one of 12. Every single one was packed. Men, women, children, the elderly, rich and poor. Masters and slaves, all crammed together with the same idea: stay near the sea and wait for the rescue boats to arrive. Some people brought piggy banks, household money containers. One person brought an entire surgeon's medical kit. These people were thinking about what they would need on the other side after they were rescued. Then there was a soldier, found on the beach near the chambers, a belt with a sword and a dagger, a bag full of coins. This is a full military kit. But it's what they found next to him that changes this whole story. A boat 9 meters long, overturned. 3 pairs of rowers and helmsmen. That boat may have been part of a Roman military rescue fleet. I save this because it might be the most incredible part of this entire story, and it starts across the bay with a man named Pliny. Pliny the Elder, 56 years old, commander of the Roman fleet in Misenum on the far side of the bay in Naples, a naturalist, a scholar, and on the afternoon Vesuvius erupted, he was at home. His sister pointed a cloud out in the sky. In his nephew's words, unusual in size and appearance, shaped like a pine tree, a tall trunk rising from the mountains branching out at the top. That description was so accurate that volcanologists still use it today. It's called Plinian eruption, named after Pliny of course. His first instinct was curiosity. He prepared a small boat to observe this massive cloud up close. He invited his nephew to come along as well, but his nephew said no, that he'd rather stay and study. That decision saved his life. Everything we know about what happened next comes from the letters the nephew wrote decades later. While Pliny prepared his observation boat, a message arrived from a woman named Rectina trapped on the coast near the volcano. And that changed everything. Pliny didn't launch a small boat. He launched quadremes, full-sized warships, boarded one personally, and sailed his fleet towards the eruption to rescue as many people as he could. As the ships crossed the bay, conditions worsened, ash falling hotter and thicker, pumice and scorched rocks hitting the decks, the shoreline blocked completely by debris. The helmsman urged him to turn back, and his response, recorded in the letters: "Fortune favours the bold. Head to Pompeianus." He couldn't reach Herculaneum anymore. The coast was too dangerous, so he diverted to Stabii, further along the shore, where his friend Pompeianus was waiting, terrified, loading his belongings into other ships. And what Pliny does next when he arrives, he takes a bath, sits down to dinner, acts completely calm. His nephew wrote about this carefully because this was crazy. He says his uncle was either genuinely cheerful or performing cheerfulness with equal greatness. Either Pliny was the calmest man ever, or he was a good enough leader to fake it when everything around him was falling apart. Outside, Vesuvius was glowing. Pliny told everyone that it was just abandoned villages that was burning, keeping the panic down to a minimum. Overnight, ash piled so high in the courtyard they couldn't get out through the doors. Buildings were shaking constantly. They tied pillows to their heads, which was improvised helmets, and made for the beach. The sea had pulled back, drawn away from the shore. They couldn't leave. Just imagine that. You're 56. You've sailed your warships into a volcanic eruption to save strangers, and the sea won't let you leave. On the beach, Pliny asked for cold water and drank. Then the air changed, the smell of sulfur, flames nearby, and everyone ran. Pliny stood, supported 2 slaves, and then collapsed immediately. His nephew wrote that his uncle had a naturally narrow airway, often inflamed. The volcanic gases choked what was already compromised. The daylight returned and they found his body on the beach, looking, in his nephew's words, more like sleep than death. But what about the people at Herculaneum? The first surge reached the shoreline around the same time. 12 hours after the eruption started, 500 degrees Celsius. The rescue was real and the boats were coming. They just didn't get there in time. Not every researcher agrees on exactly how the people in these chambers died, and that's worth being honest about. The victims fully exposed on the beach, most scientists agree they died almost instantly from thermal shock. 500 degrees hitting an unprotected body leaves very little room for debate. But the people inside the chambers that were partially sheltered, the stone vaults blocked the physical impact of the surge, but it didn't block the heat. Some researchers argue people deeper inside may have died from severe burns and shock rather than instant heat death. Others suggest ash inhalation played a role. The honest answer? It probably varied. The people closest to the openings faced the worst. The people at the back may have survived a few seconds longer, which almost makes it worse. What evidence does agree on though is this. Chemical analysis found iron oxide residues inside their skulls. The chemical signature of hemoglobin, blood, superheated so fast it left stains on their bones. Their blood didn't drain, it didn't dry, it boiled and became residue. And most of this city hasn't even been found yet. Right, let's get back to something I teased a little earlier. 20 years old, lying on a wooden bed inside a building on the main street. While 300 people died in the chambers on the shore, this man died alone. His name isn't known. Researchers believe he was the guardian of a very important building. When they examined his skull, they found something inside it. Small black fragments, shiny, angular, the texture of broken glass. Then they analysed them, and what they found was this man's brain that had been vitrified. It had been turned into glass. Not burned away, not destroyed. The extreme heat converted his brain tissue into a solid glassy material. The rapid cooling that followed locked it in place. When they put those fragments under a scanning electron microscope, they could see individual neurons, brain cells, still intact, preserved in glass for nearly 2,000 years. Across all the victim sites, approximately 2,000 bodies have been recovered. This is the only one where this has been found. The conditions required? Extreme heat followed by rapid cooling in exactly the right sequence. They were so specific that researchers said it may never be documented ever again. 300 people in the boathouse were erased in a fraction of a second. One man on the main street was preserved forever. Same eruption and the same city, but completely different outcomes based on where you happened to be standing. Only about 10% of Herculaneum has been excavated. 90% is still underground, buried beneath a modern Italian town called Herculaneum. 26,000 people live their daily lives directly above a Roman city that still contains buildings, bodies and artifacts nobody has seen for 2,000 years. And it's not just the bodies. Archaeologists have found hundreds of ancient scrolls inside a villa at the edge of the site. An entire library, carbonized by the heat into rolls of charcoal for centuries, nobody could read without destroying them. Then, in 2023, a team used AI and X-ray imaging to read the scrolls without ever opening them. The first word they deciphered from inside these sealed scrolls that are 2,000 years old was porphyrus, purple. 4 million people visit Pompeii every single year. 521,000 visit Herculaneum, the city with the open mouths, the glass brain. The unread library is the one most people don't go to see. This one got to me more than most. I think it was the keys, the fact that they were locking their front doors, because that meant right up until the end they thought they were all going home. There's a city under a city, and we've only seen 10% of it. And that's it from me guys. My name's Joe, this is Buried Earth. Thank you so much for watching. On screen right now, 2 videos we think you're going to absolutely love. And to be notified on our next upload, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.